Spin-offs are an extremely difficult gray area. What's poppin'? Spin-offs are extremely bizarre, and more often than not, they can come off as dull and bad, not being able to recapture the magic of the original series or movies. Star Wars most likely being the one that is such a mixed bag. There are good things like the earlier seasons of The Mandalorian and Andor, but then there's not so good stuff like the Book of Boba Fett and Kenobi, which I regard to be one of the bigger disappointments of the Star Wars franchise. So, rightfully, I want to compare the Breaking Bad franchise to the Star Wars franchise. Okay, I know that's a bold statement, so let me explain. More specifically, I'll be comparing the Kenobi series and the Breaking Bad movie El Camino. These pieces of media in a way have a lot more similarities than you might think. Let me explain. The main character is struggling with the aftermath of their partner's decisions and downfall, so much so that they go on the run and live in hiding. Their trauma follows them, and we uncover more about their fears and their PTSD from the events of the main series or movies. This, of course, is the general idea. Now, of course these two have their differences as well, but to me at least they have a very similar structure, and a very similar path that they follow in terms of the story. These two are also just on different planes. El Camino, despite being a movie and having less time to tell a story, manages to be executed better and divulge into more character development than Kenobi managed to do in its 6-episode run. Many people have even come out to the agreement that Kenobi would have been better as a movie instead of a dragged out series, and I'm one to agree with this side. More often than not, I found myself sitting there watching this filler, these awful and bad sequences, this very dry acting, and this payoff that really meant nothing to me. Why is that? I love the character of Kenobi. His story is one of brotherhood and tragedy, and he is genuinely charming. And yet his story, which many people were excited to see, fell short of anything spectacular. Despite this series guaranteeing success, and the trailers really selling it for a lot of us, especially having Duel of the Fates play in it, that was just awesome, it really just proved to be a letdown. Both El Camino and Kenobi had come out years, even decades after the original character's debut, and yet one told a story worth listening to, while the other left a sour taste in my mouth. Let's take a look at where we are at with Kenobi during the events of the show. It's been almost a decade since the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Galactic Empire. Most Jedi are now dead, and the grip the Empire has on the galaxy is ever expanding. We see Kenobi going day by day, just trying to lay low and survive. He keeps surveillance of young Luke, and he fears for his protection. Uncle Owen, however, wants Kenobi to have nothing to do with Luke. As rightfully so, he's concerned that any teachings of the Jedi will lead Luke down the same path as his father. This is a really good approach to the show, and probably one of the better decisions that it made. Unfortunately, the show kinda dips for a good while. We spend a lot of time with little Leia, and as nice as it is, she ends up overstaying her welcome. And we get a lot of filler episodes that honestly just take away from the main series as a whole, and the connection between Kenobi and Anakin. Not to mention, there are just so many scenes that are outright goofy about this show, the most infamous being the chase scene between Leia and the pirates. Although I enjoyed Leia's relationship with Kenobi, and this almost father-daughter bond they were growing, it felt like a lot else could have been done for Kenobi, and more often than not, Leia was used as a device to get the plot going. Most people knew the only reason we really wanted to watch this show was to see another duel between Vader and Kenobi. Unfortunately, to get to that point, it would be a long, dragged-out ride of mediocrity. Minor complaint too, but the actual fighting choreography for this show is just kinda stupid, and it's not really thought through. I know Imperials aren't trained to be perfect, but they are literally treated as bumbling idiots, who can't even hold their gun and lose when someone pushes their helmet. Star Wars as of recently has not been selling any points that the Imperial is even remotely scary. They're jokes, and I do wish there was more fear from these Imperials that make the stakes actually present. But unfortunately, the show doesn't deliver, and instead gives us slapstick fights like these. Now let's get to one of the main antagonists, Reva. Oh boy, Reva is a lower ranked Inquisitor that basically has to kill her way to the top. She's often talked down upon. Her backstory being that she was a Padawan during the time of Order 66, and survived the Purge of the Jedi. Reva was actually stabbed by Vader, but survived because of the dark side. Okay, listen. You can defend this all you want, that's okay. If this is how it works in the comics, that's fine. The Force has always been a little weird to touch upon, but I'm sorry, this is just kinda stupid. To the Star Wars lore, I guess it makes sense, but narratively, and most likely logically, as a youngling, I just doubt she would be able to take a stab of that measure and manage to survive, even if she hated Anakin with a burning passion. which I don't buy considering her teachings being of the Jedi way. Even as far as surviving another stab from Vader later. Like at this point, it is a bit more believable, but honestly, what she did after was kinda stupid. Her attacking Uncle Owen and then going for Luke. Like, why? It feels kinda out of place considering her main vendetta being against Kenobi and Anakin. Like, okay, we get it, but it's still kinda pointless. Also, I'm not the only one who wanted Vader to Count Dooku Reva when he had the option. That can't just be me, right? It was like a perfect opportunity. On top of that, her acting isn't the best. Now Vader on the other hand was both cool but also kinda lame at the same time. How do you mess up Vader? In the 4th episode, Reva fails and lets Kenobi escape off supposedly one of the most dangerous bases that the Empire has. Supposedly, which like another thing, they really did not sell to us that this base is any difficulty at all to infiltrate, as the show makes it out to be. I mean literally in the end, they straight up run through a crowd of stormtroopers and survive. What? Kenobi doesn't even activate his lightsaber, he's just shooting blindly. But yeah, Vader's storming in to basically choke her out or kill her. And I'm like, damn, this is gonna go hard. But no, he spares her, because apparently Vader's forgiving now. Despite him knowing she would turn against him, which we later find out after he stabs her. Like, why would you keep her around? She's literally a liability to your operation. That's just bad planning, and I don't even feel like Vader would ever allow this. But nah, all logic is out of the window for this one, I suppose. And let's talk about Vader versus Obi-Wan. Now on one hand, I really like it, but on the other hand, I don't really like it. The fight is kinda shot weird with a lot of shaking going on, which makes it kinda hard to follow, but it does turn around in the ending where we see Vader's mask split, revealing his eye, and both Anakin and Vader's voices can be heard fighting each other. This was really good and easily the best part of the whole show. And yet, I might be in the minority saying this, but I kinda wish this fight and the whole series never happened. Like, the exchange Vader and Obi-Wan give to each other when they fight on the Death Star, it doesn't feel as impactful in a way as it did before knowing they would meet again. Like, Vader says,
"When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master."
Only a master of evil, Darth.
And like to me, that was true until they met again. Like, shouldn't he have said this here? And yeah, you can argue, technically he's still a learner, but to me the line just feels awkward now. Also, the look Alec Guinness gave to Vader was something priceless. It felt like Kenobi was actually seeing Vader for the first time, like seeing a ghost or a demon or something. Like I said, the final fight was really good, but I actually would have preferred them never meeting again. All in all, Kenobi just didn't sell it for me, and I would have rather lived with them never meeting again. Also, Reva was just kind of getting off the hook, which feels kind of weird. It's like giving a character an unearned redemption. This show is just so messy. Now let's talk about the good stuff. El Camino, woo! We open right up after the events of the last episode of Breaking Bad. Literally moments after. Jesse's fleeing the scene and goes to Skinny Pete and Badger. Honestly, they are real friends for this. They literally give him all he needs to pick himself back up. Anyways, Jesse is in the heat with the police and knows at this point he has nothing holding him back to stay here in Albuquerque. This is actually told to us in the flashback, a really good flashback where Mike and him have an exchange. Mike tells him he would leave if he was him. Which brings me to another thing. They didn't utilize the flashbacks or Hayden Christensen nearly enough. I think the show could have really benefited from more interactions between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Despite being free, he has triggers from everyday tasks like taking a shower, which brings him back to the time he was literally a slave. Treated like an animal, degraded, and humiliated. This movie doesn't hold back on showing how inhumanely treated Jesse was during the time he was kept by Jack and his gang. It's really hard to watch, but it makes his trauma all the more real and beneficial for how he is right now. Jesse heads to Todd's old apartment so he can loot it for its cash. Throughout the movie, we have constant flashbacks to when Todd made Jesse accompany him on running errands. Todd is genuinely terrifying in this movie, as he is a different type of villain. He is one who kills without remorse. He puts on a jolly and respectful face, but beneath that, he murders and moves on about his day without a second thought to it. It makes the scenes where Jesse and him are interacting all the more scary. He's unpredictable. Todd seems nice, but you know as a viewer what he can do. Jesse ends up getting entangled with the main villain for this film. Neil Candy and the welding company he worked for helped install one of the very shackles Jesse had to wear for a year. When Jesse has to split the money, he is rightfully pissed. What makes things worse, however, is that he doesn't have enough to start a new life and have a full new identity. So eventually, he goes to the welding company and confronts them. And it ends in an amazing shootout where Jesse bests Candy. and takes the money for himself and blows the place up. It is so satisfying seeing Jesse finally get back at the people who made the very shackles he wore. El Camino really ties off any loose ends that Jesse Pinkman as a character had to be finished. He ends up finishing things with his parents, with Brock, with his enemies, and with the constant trauma he has endured. By the end of the film, he is in Alaska. He has something that he has never really been given in his life: opportunity. It ends with a conversation with the one he loved, Jane. It is so bittersweet, and it is so nice that he can finally put these traumas to bed. He drives off, and that's the last we see of him. There are plenty, and I mean plenty, of amazing scenes in this movie. So much so that I can't even pick one. We see scenes of Todd's manipulation and psychotic attitudes. We have a scene with Walter and Jesse where Walter tells Jesse he would do good in college, specifically in a business major. We really get to see how much Walter actually did care for him. Like I've said earlier, Todd being in the flashbacks as the main antagonist of these memories, it's a really scary thing to watch. He makes Jesse stay in the trunk of his car next to a dead body. He even later manipulates Jesse to put the gun down that he was going to kill Todd with. Jesse is a victim of manipulation, and they really go all in with this idea. It is so heartbreaking seeing Jesse fall for this trap, knowing damn well he would continue to live a life as a slave until Walter would save him. This movie also just looks amazing. We have the great cinematography of Breaking Bad, but on a movie scale budget. It looks phenomenal. Really, the only gripe with this movie that I have is that some of the characters look kinda older than they typically should, but it's probably because this movie came out, years after the original series concluded, and it's not that big of an issue. It was just glaring to see that Todd put on a few pounds. This movie went all in with the trauma of Jesse, which is something I think Kenobi should have done more with. We get light sprinkles here and there, but it needed more of this for us to really feel how Order 66 and the loss of his brother Anakin has really affected him. I can't believe I'm saying this, but more flashbacks would have been really helpful for Kenobi, and it would have hurt all the more seeing happy memories with Anakin, only to, well, come back to a reality where he is now Lord Vader. So, when it comes down to the two spin-offs, the idea of having a traumatic story where the main character has to put his demons to bed, Kenobi falls short of a good narrative. Meanwhile, El Camino ties the story of Jesse Pinkman in an ever so satisfying way, really diving deep into his time being with Todd. Kenobi, on the other hand, just couldn't fully commit to the main conflict at hand and had to fill the empty space with mediocrity and poor storytelling. Kenobi, that's how you do spin-offs. Take notes, considering a season 2 might be in the works. Why? But of course, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, it helps out the channel a ton, and check out some of my other stuff if you like this video, and I'll catch you all later.